Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Haxi Myers-Balkin. These are today's top stories. A man whose experience of the Rwandan genocide was turned into a major Hollywood film appears in court, charged with terrorism and 12 other charges. Amnesty International urging Kigali authorities to guarantee a fair trial. Iran dismisses claims that Tehran's been plotting to murder the US's ambassador to South Africa. That allegedly to avenge the killing of Iran's most senior general in a US airstrike back in January. And with the Malian capital still embroiled in fraught discussions over the transition to civilian rule following last month's coup, we head to the north of the country, more concerned with the region's ongoing Islamist insurgency. A man portrayed as a hero in a Hollywood film about the Rwandan genocide has been charged with terrorism in a Kigali court. Paul Rusesabagina was also accused of complicity to murder and forming an armed group. In recent years, Rusesabagina has become an outspoken critic of President Paul Kagame. Our regional correspondent Mukwera Shleshweyo has more.
Paul Rusesabagina appeared in court today in handcuffs and under heavy security. He's facing charges that are linked to terrorism and the forming of an armed group which prosecutors there say is responsible for the killing of some Rwandans. Now, he declined to plead to the group of charges, saying that he prefers rather to plead to each one separately. His family say that they didn't even know he was appearing in court. They say that the government has imposed their lawyers on him and therefore denied him any meaningful representation. Paul Rusesabagina is known for saving more than 1,000 people during the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, where more than 800,000 people were killed. Now, his story was made famous in 2004 by the Hollywood movie Hotel Rwanda. He then went on to win several humanitarian awards. By this time, he was already living in exile, where he began to be critical about the government of Paul Kagame. He also joined some opposition politics. Now, dissidence in Rwanda is not tolerated by the authorities. There have been some activists and some opposition party leaders who have ended up jailed or murdered, some of them even while living outside of Rwanda. So now the circumstances under which Paul Rusesabagina ended up in Kigali are murky. His family say that he was kidnapped in Dubai after traveling there from his home in the US. The government in Rwanda initially said that he was arrested under an international warrant. They later said that he was arrested on arrival in Kigali. The supporters of Paul Rusesabagina say that this trial is a show trial and that he will probably be forced to confess to crimes that he has not committed. Paul Rusesabagina is expected to appear in court later this week, where a bail application may be considered.
Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara will be allowed to run for a third term when the country heads to the polls in presidential elections scheduled for the end of October. That decision announced by the country's Constitutional Council, despite opposition concerns regarding constitutional term limits in the country. Former President Laurent Gbagbo and former Prime Minister Guillaume Soro, meanwhile, have both been barred from running due to ongoing criminal proceedings against the two men. 10 children have died in Tanzania after a fire swept through their dormitory. 7 others survived, but they suffered severe burns. The blaze broke out at a private primary school in Itera village in the north of the country. Police, the local fire department and government officials have now launched a joint investigation into the cause of that tragedy. Iran is denying claims that the country is planning to assassinate the US ambassador to South Africa. US intelligence reports claiming that the murder of Lana Marks would be intended as revenge for the US killing of Iran's most senior general in a drone strike back in January. Some suggesting Marks was singled out by Tehran because of her close ties to President Donald Trump. A little earlier, I spoke to our regional correspondent, Jane Flanagan, in Cape Town.
The documents that US intelligence officers say they've seen says that they've been hearing whispers about a plot against Lana Marks for some time, since quite early on in the year, but that more details have emerged in recent weeks, which made them think that the threat was more credible, that she was being singled out as some sort of retaliation for the killing of Qasem Soleimani, who was Iran's most senior general. Miss Marks became ambassador to South Africa in 2018. Before that, she was known primarily as a handbag designer and also as a neighbor of President Trump at his Mar-a-Lago development in Florida. She's not a particularly political or controversial figure. So it did seem rather surprising today that she was named in this rather extraordinary plot, which US intelligence officials claim also embroils the Iranian embassy in Pretoria, the South African capital.
So, Jane, what has all the reaction been to this in South Africa, and what indeed have we been hearing from the US embassy in Cape Town?
Well, South Africa seemed to be as surprised as a lot of other people today, and a spokeswoman for the foreign ministry said they learnt about the news in the Politico news website, along with us, everybody else, and they didn't really have much comment to make. Iran and South Africa have very good relations, and the analysts I've spoken to here said it doesn't really make much sense. Iran has few friends around the world. South Africa's relationship, its support means a lot to it, and it certainly wouldn't jeopardize that by attempting something so brazen as an assassination of a senior American diplomat on South African soil. The local Iranian embassy has also just dismissed this as saber rattling by President Trump and the leaking of these documents timed to coincide with the forthcoming election. As for the US embassy, they made no comment on whether security had been stepped up for Miss Marks or whether she had changed her routine. But she is a very active person on social media, and it does seem that she has been saying a lot less recently on her Instagram and her Twitter feed about what she's up to, where she is, and the duties she's carrying out. So that does suggest that she has been advised to keep a lower profile than she previously has.
One of the frontrunners in the global race to find a COVID-19 vaccine is about to begin a round of trials in Kenya. The vaccine, developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University in the United Kingdom, will be used on around 400 health workers. Some 30,000 people in the UK, the USA, Brazil and South Africa have already signed up for this third and final phase of testing. The vaccine's arrival in Kenya is being met with enthusiasm from local doctors.
Having a local group participate in these studies will help inform whether this vaccine is for us. Does it require any modification? Is it going to do harm? Step 1 and Step 2, they are looking to see whether it is safe, and secondly, whether it is going to create the resistance that we are looking for, or what we call immunogenicity.
In the Malian capital, Bamako, the junta has been holding talks with the opposition and civil society. But in Timbuktu, in northern Mali, the political wrangling feels a very long way off. Instead, security remains the chief priority, with Islamist insurgents posing a constant threat. Farmers in the region, meanwhile, are having to contend with the devastating knock-on effects of the sanctions and border closures imposed by regional bloc ECOWAS. Nicolas Germain reports.
700 kilometres north of the capital Bamako, the Malian army patrols the city of Timbuktu. Its role has not changed since the military coup last month. Jihadist attacks have not ceased. Since the coup, more than 20 Malian soldiers have been killed.
Malgré ce qui s'est passé à Bamako, nous avons continué avec nos activités régaliennes, à savoir la protection des personnes et de leurs biens. Cependant, ces événements nous ont quand même obligés à redoubler de vigilance.
Following the coup, neighbouring countries from regional bloc ECOWAS closed their borders and banned trade with Mali. Timbuktu's economy has been badly hit.
Les sanctions de la CEDEAO quand même font plus de mal aux populations que le gouvernement lui-même. C'est la pauvreté des populations qui grandit, cette pauvreté que nous avons déjà connue, mais les gens ne font que s'appauvrir davantage.
Traders in Timbuktu, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, now struggle to buy goods.
On prend ici Tombouctou, là on vit, ça nous crée beaucoup de problèmes parce que tout vient de l'extérieur. On n'a pas d'usine ici, on n'a rien. Donc quand on ferme les frontières, vraiment c'est un grand problème pour nous.
The junta will meet ECOWAS leaders this Tuesday in Ghana. In Timbuktu and across the country, Malians are hoping that an agreement will be found to lift the sanctions that have already been in place for nearly a month.
Now, they've had concerts and rehearsals cancelled due to the pandemic, but that hasn't stopped the Cairo Celebration Choir finding a way to spread a message of hope. Using nothing but their mobile phones, the choir used lockdown to record and produce a single, one that's since become a familiar sound on Egyptian radio and also beyond. Well, that's the end of our show, but we'll leave you with an extract of that song entitled El Youm in Arabic, or The Day in English. That's from the Cairo Celebration Choir. Enjoy.